Hi everyone, it's Peter Schiff. This is Easter Sunday, April 4th, 2010, and I just couldn't resist the opportunity to blog on Alan Greenspan once again. You know, I had the displeasure of watching him interviewed this morning on This Week on ABC. And once again, Alan Greenspan minimized his own incompetence and the Fed's own involvement and responsibility in nurturing and sustaining the housing bubble. And Mr. Greenspan was asked about an op-ed that was written in the New York Times by one of the people who made hundreds of millions of dollars betting on the demise of subprime mortgages. And in his op-ed, he challenged, and rightfully so, that if he could see the problem, Alan Greenspan should have been able to see it and warn about it. And of course, Alan Greenspan tries to dismiss the fact that this individual bet right to nothing more than sheer luck, is basically what he's trying to say. The people who made money betting on the collapse of subprime just got lucky. Well, it wasn't just luck. It's possible that some people could have just done it out of sheer dumb luck. But a lot of people who did it, and a lot of people who didn't bet against it, understood the problems and understood it precisely. And, you know, I also bet against subprime. I didn't do it in nearly as big a way because I didn't have as much money to wager at the time. I was a smaller firm when I set up or helped set up a hedge fund that made the same bets on a smaller scale. But, you know, one of the reasons that more of my clients at Europe Pacific Capital did not become involved in a hedge fund is because government made it difficult for me to sell it. Because I can only offer the product to accredited investors. There was a very complicated prospectus that basically said that you could lose all of your money. So it was a very scary prospectus for people to read. And the minimum was $100,000, which is still relatively low in the hedge fund world. But for a lot of people, that was a lot of money to risk. They would have liked to have maybe gambled $10,000 or $20,000, but I really couldn't take such small bets. And so, ironically, because of all the rules in the securities industry that are designed to protect investors, in this case, it ended up protecting them from a lot of profits that they might have made. But the fact of the matter is, there were hundreds of my clients who wanted to bet against subprime, but didn't want to make as big a bet as government regulations really required them to make. And there are many other people around the country who knew there was a problem, but they weren't sophisticated enough to understand how to profit from it or how to bet on it. You know, Alan Greenspan on this show said that he only knows of 3 or 4 people in the whole world that saw this coming. Now, I wonder if Alan Greenspan is including me in those 3 and 4 people. Probably not, but I know of hundreds and hundreds, because when I was going on television and writing about these problems, I got thousands of emails from people all around the country that agreed with me. I wasn't the only one that saw this coming. There were plenty of people. You know, a lot of people have seen my mortgage banker speech that's on YouTube, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. After I made that speech, there were a number of people that came up to me and said, "You're 100% right. I agree with you 100%. There were plenty of people in the housing industry, in the mortgage industry, that knew this thing was coming. You know, you didn't have to be a genius to figure it out. I mean, I figured it out, and I'm certainly no genius. And, you know, what's important is it's not just that I was saying, oh, there's going to be a collapse, there's going to be a collapse. I laid it out exactly the way it happened. And I'm not saying this now again, because I want to toot my own horn. It's just important to show that Alan Greenspan is full of it. And I know that I'm not the only person who warned about this crisis. I just warned about it in a very public way so that now I can prove it, right? It's one thing to say you predicted the crisis. It's another thing to prove it. And obviously, if you go and read my book, Crash Proof, and if you look at what I was writing on my Europac website, going back to 2004, articles that not only did I publish on my own site, but that I sent out to newspapers, I sent out to hundreds of reporters, they were printed and reprinted on numerous websites throughout the years. I laid it out precisely. I said in no uncertain terms that the Federal Reserve, by keeping interest rates too low, was inflating a housing bubble, and that when it burst, it would bankrupt our lending institutions and plunge the economy into the worst recession since the Great Depression. I specifically pointed out the fraud in the securitization market, in the rating agencies, in the appraisal companies. I specifically talked about the imminent bankruptcy of Freddie and Fannie and what that bailout would do to our nation's debts. I wrote and spoke ad nauseum about the problems in the financial community for our lending institutions, our banks, and how the collapse of the real estate bubble would render them insolvent. I wrote time and time again that real estate prices nationally would fall 30 to 50%. And I specifically identified how it would unfold, all the sequence of events. I said that it was the Fed that was keeping interest rates too low, short-term rates. That's what made the teaser rates, interest-only mortgages, negative AM mortgages, that's what made them so enticing. And that's what lured so many borrowers into this trap. I urged the Federal Reserve on television in 2004 and 2005 and 2000 to raise interest rates, to raise them more aggressively, because the longer they kept them low, the more people were going to fall into the armed time bomb, and the worse the losses were going to be when that bomb exploded. And I described in specific detail how it would explode. That when interest rates went up, that it would make these mortgages, that people couldn't afford to make the payments when they reset. That more and more people would default. As they defaulted, that credit would start contracting. That it would be harder for people to borrow money to buy houses, which would push more downward pressure on prices. That the speculators would turn into sellers. I wrote in specific detail. I explained it in my book, Crash Proof, and again, I spoke about it at the Western Regional Mortgage Bankers Conference, the one that is on YouTube now from 2006, but I also spoke about it at that same conference in 2005. And the fact of the matter is, if I could figure it out, and I knew how precisely it was going to unwind, obviously Alan Greenspan knew it too. The difference is, he was a politician. He was a central banker. He didn't care. He deliberately nurtured the housing bubble because it was good politics. He wanted to help his friends in Washington get reelected. So he inflated that bubble, knowing full well what the consequences would be. And now the man has the gall to go on national television and say that nobody saw this coming, it was blind luck, and that he underestimated capitalism. And of course, I got a knot in my stomach when I heard the interviewer say, well, Alan, you've acknowledged that capitalism doesn't work. Isn't this a repudiation of the free market, of Ayn Rand? And you know what? It is. But he tried to say that it wasn't. But you know what, Alan? It is. You are repudiating capitalism. Why don't you just acknowledge the truth? Just fess up. Bernie Madoff confessed. Why can't you? Tell the public the truth. Honor capitalism. Honor Ayn Rand, because she's rolling over in her grave right now. This is not a failure of government regulation. It's a failure of central banking. It's a failure of politicians. And you, sir, Alan Greenspan, are the biggest failure of them all. And I don't know what your speaking fees are. $100,000, $250,000 that you get to speak. Whatever it is, I'll pay it for the privilege of debating you on this very subject. I don't know if you're ever going to see this video, but hopefully somebody will see it and forward it to you, and you'll accept my challenge. Also, I hope everybody that sees this video, let's flood the inboxes and the phone banks of ABC. They had Alan Greenspan on. Have Peter Schiff on. Let me defend capitalism, and let me expose Alan Greenspan for the fraud that he is, because that's what he is. This is a fraud, and the people, the American public deserves the truth, and I am in a position to give them the truth and stand up for the principles that Alan Greenspan pretends that he believes in, but that all of his actions are discrediting. Anyway, so as I said, forward this YouTube video to as many people as you can. Let's see if this thing can maybe go viral. Maybe the guys at ABC will see it. If not, bring it to their attention. Maybe Alan Greenspan will see it. Maybe someone will see it. Maybe we can make some noise, make some news about this challenge that I'll put out to the networks to cover me or to Alan Greenspan to debate me. I forgot to mention that in 2004 or 5, in a congressional testimony, Alan Greenspan actually went out of his way to encourage the use of adjustable rate mortgage, to praise adjustable rate mortgages. And the very day he did that, I wrote a commentary criticizing him, saying, Alan Greenspan, how could you do this at the point where you're about to start raising interest rates? How can you possibly encourage the use of adjustable rate mortgages? He should have taken that opportunity to criticize those mortgages, to talk about the problems. In fact, he should have done more than talk. He should have raised interest rates aggressively to defuse the bomb before it went off.